Hi everyone, I am Setayesh, and this is the sixth episode of Literary Schools in 15 Minutes. Today we'll talk more about modernism, fully covering the movement, its historical background, movement's variation, and a brief mention of the representative authors and works of the movement. So let's get into it. I would like to start with the historical background of the movement. If modernism revolved around just one historical event, it would be the catastrophe of the First World War. Before the war, modernist writers thought of themselves as rebels who broke apart societal certainties. They broke convention by writing frankly about sex and by insulting religion. By breaking these taboos, they found themselves portrayed as dangerous rebels. The coming of the First World War fulfilled modernist predictions of fragmentation beyond anything they could have imagined. The war began when a Serbian rebel, Gavrilo Princip, assassinated the Archduke Franz Ferdinand in 1914. The complicated network of alliances which divided Europe became the mechanism of this huge destruction which lasted for approximately 4 years. The Germans attempted to march across Belgium and take Paris in 6 weeks. The plan bogged down, and soon the armies found themselves wagging trench warfare in northern France and Belgium. Millions of these soldiers and people died in futile attempts to move the line forward just a few more yards. Among these casualties were modernist artists and writers. The tone of excitement about violence that characterized earlier modernist writing disappeared. Writers were utterly numbed by the actual effect of real destruction, the destruction of a real war. Two poems capture the war's psychological effect. Pound's Hugh Selwyn Moberly and Eliot's The Wasteland. Pound addresses the war directly. Quote, "There died a myriad, for an old, the B word, gun in the teeth for a botched civilization." Eliot's The Wasteland is a collection of fragments, pieces of culture broken apart and without meaning. It might just be the best verbal portrait ever created of civilized man confronting the possibility that everything has been destroyed. Now, let's take a look at some of the smaller movements within modernism. The first one is called fin du siècle. This French term means end of the century. It denotes the interval between 1880 and 1914, a transition period when writers and artists abandoned old conventions. Some despaired that Western culture was morally degrading, while some others anticipated the new century with great hopes. Writers associated with this mindset include Stéphane Mallarmé, the French Stéphane Mallarmé, Oscar Wilde, and George Bernard Shaw. The next small movement is Imagism. Imagism was the best known of the dozens of small movements within modernist poetry before the First World War. The founder was Ezra Pound, who formulated the rules of Imagism. Imagist poets were encouraged to simply present an image. And they said that the poet does not comment or does not use excessive adjectives. Pound urged images to use the rhythm of the metronome. So no adjectives, no comments, just take an image and describe the image. Okay, something like similar to Japanese haiku poetry, which is a really short form of poetry that like describes an image of a, for example, landscape or a anything like a footprint in the snow in like in 5 words. Just that. That's simple. So it is imagism is kind of similar to that, but somehow they have some things in common. Pound published the anthology The Imagists in 1914. Other poets included H.D., William Carlos Williams, Richard Aldington, and Amy Lowell. Pound himself soon moved on, but Amy Lowell continued to publish Imagist anthologies for years after the movement had become irrelevant. After Imagism, Pound moved on to Vorticism. This movement consisted primarily of Pound, and the writer T.E. Holm, and the painter and novelist Wyndham Lewis. Their works were published in their magazine called Blast. Vorticism took Imagism's basic tenets, combined them with Cubist painting style, and injected aggressive anger to it. At the same time, at this time, Pound had discovered the Chinese written character and decided its combination of sound, text, and image created a luminous vortex of energy. The movement fell apart as World War One began. Actually, the anger in this kind of in vorticism seemed small compared to the actual rough and trench warfare. Now, the Bloomsbury Group was a gathering of English writers, artists, and intellectuals in London from about 1907 to the early 1930s. They held no uniform philosophical beliefs, but commonly expressed an aversion to moral prudery, a desire for greater social tolerance, and pacifism. Members included Virginia Woolf, E.M. Forster, Clive Bell, and Lytton Strachey. The Objectivists were a group of modernist poets who formed relatively late in the period. In a way, they can be considered descendants of the Imagists, but their poems tend to be even starker and flatter. They drew inspiration from William Carlos Williams, but most members were of the younger generation, born after 1900. George Oppen, Louis Zukowski, and Carlos Reznikov are the best known objectivists. And finally, we have the Lost Generation, which was a name given by Gertrude Stein to young Americans who migrated to Paris in the 1920s. Ernest Hemingway is the most famous of the Lost Generation, and he was, in fact, the person who was told by Gertrude Stein, quote, "You are all a lost generation." Many of this lost generation were artists and writers, but uh, all of them were attracted to Paris because of the strong dollar and the bohemian and Parisian French lifestyle. Hemingway's novel, The Sun Also Rises, is the enduring portrait of this lost generation group. So they were constantly crossed paths with European artists already living there, such as Picasso, Pound, Joyce, Stein herself, and Brancusi. And it had made Paris one of the greatest artistic centers of that period. By the end of the 1920s, however, most of these Americans had already returned home, and that is exactly why they were called the Lost Generation. They just had to come back. Now, let me briefly mention some of the key modernist writers. We have T.S. Eliot, James Joyce, Virginia Woolf, Ezra Pound, William Faulkner, Gertrude Stein, and Wallace Stevens. And we already know a lot about T.S. Eliot. He was born in St. Louis in 1888. He settled in London, and in 1922 he published his most famous modernist work, The Wasteland. The single most important modernist work is The Wasteland. He died in 1965, and that's it. Then we have James Joyce, who was born in Dublin in 1882. He is the most important modernist writer. In 1922, he published Ulysses, which is considered by many the finest novel ever written, and the of course the finest modernist novel. He died in Zurich in 1941. Virginia Woolf was born in London in 1882. She perfected the stream of consciousness technique in her novels such as Mrs. Dalloway or To the Lighthouse. She also wrote A Room of One's Own. But unfortunately, she committed suicide in 1941, and we know that she had struggled with depression and suppression because of being a woman and being a woman writer all throughout her life. So that was just sad to see her commit suicide. Ezra Pound was born in Idaho in 1885. He was the father of literary modernism who created imagism and vorticism. He wrote the cantos, which the cantos are a really interesting is a really interesting work. He was indicted for treason for fascist sympathies and spent 13 years in a mental hospital. He died in Italy in 1972. William Faulkner, the next writer, was born in Mississippi in 1897. His 1929 novel, The Sound and the Fury, contains his most successful experiments with time. He also died in 1962. Then we have Gertrude Stein, who was born in Pennsylvania in 1874. She moved to Paris in 1903 and hosted the salon that nurtured the lost generation. She coined the term lost generation herself, actually. She died in 1946. The last writer is Wallace Stevens, who was also born in Pennsylvania in 1879. He lived a dual life as an insurance lawyer and a modernist poet. His first book, Harmonium, was published in 1923. He received the Pulitzer Prize in 1955 and died that same year. Now, let me briefly touch on some of the key modernist works. Um, Obviously, the first one would be The Wasteland by T.S. Eliot. It is essentially plotless. This poem captures historical development through illusions, lots of illusions. It expresses despair at a world reduced to fragments, short against our ruin. This is a quote of the book itself. Then we have Ulysses by James Joyce. It is a meticulously detailed day in the life of three Dubliners, paralleling Homer's Odyssey. It was banned for its frank treatment of sex and insulting portraits of religion. The Cantos by Ezra Pound is an epic poem including history. It's composed of fragments of different voices from different times and places. The list of allusions of the cantos has over 10,000 entries, lots of allusions, and that just makes the cantos a very interesting work of art. To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf demonstrates how modernist technique can be applied to emotion, memory, and family relationships. Then we have The Sound and the Fury by William Faulkner that tells of the fall of the Compson family through multiple narrators, including Benji, a character with no conception of time, and so many other characters. A Farewell to Arms by Ernest Hemingway, and Harmonium by Wallace Stevens. Okay, now let me summarize what we have covered in the last week's and today's video about the literary movement of modernism. Modernism emerged as a response to the rapid technological change, new theories from Freud, Marx, Darwin, and Nietzsche, and the horrors of the First World War and the fragmentation of society. It was characterized by stream of consciousness narration in fiction, fragmented structures in poetry, and extensive use of illusion and the themes of alienation, city, and the presence of the past. Uh, Modernist writers rejected Victorian certainties and attempted to come to terms with where humanity stood after its cornerstone had been pulverized. They wandered through the pieces of the past looking for what was valuable and what could inspire the construction of a new society. The movement gave us some of the most important works in the entire English literature. Works such as Ulysses, The Wasteland, The Sound and the Fury, and To the Lighthouse, for example, and the cantos in poetry. These works continue to challenge and inspire readers to this very day. And there is another interesting thing that I want to add is about the cantos and Ulysses. There are allusions in these two works. I think I have mentioned it in the last week's video, but there are allusions in these two works that are not yet discovered. Like, we don't know what they are referring to. And some of them are personal allusions, which, the writer refers to some event in their own life. So it's just like reading a mystery when you are trying to read and decode these kind of literary works. Okay, thank you for your attention. This was the end of modernism. Stay tuned for more videos and don't forget to check out the channel for more videos on English language and literature. Take care and goodbye.